Education in Afghanistan includes K-12 and higher education, which is supervised by the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Higher Education in Kabul, Afghanistan. Afghanistan is going through a nationwide rebuilding process and, despite setbacks, institutions are established across the country. By 2013 there were 10.5 million students attending schools in Afghanistan, a country with a population of around 27.5 million people. History. One of the oldest schools in Afghanistan is the Habibia High School in Kabul, which was built by King Habibullah Khan in 1903 to educate students from the nation's elite class. In the 1920s, the German-funded Amani High School opened in Kabul, and about a decade later two French lycées began, the AEFE and the Lycée Esteghlal. The Kabul University was established in 1932. Education was improved under the rule of King Zahir Shah between 1933 and 1973. Making primary schools available to about half the population who were younger than 12 years of age and expanding the secondary school system in Kabul University. During the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, the government of the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan reformed the education system. Education was stressed for both sexes, and widespread literacy programs were set up. By 1978, women made up 40% of the doctors and 60% of the teachers at Kabul University. 440,000 female students were enrolled in educational institutions and 80,000 more in literacy programs. Despite improvements, large percentage of the population remained illiterate. Beginning with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, successive wars virtually destroyed the nation's education system. Most teachers fled during the wars to neighboring countries. In the middle of the 1990s, about 650 schools were functioning throughout the country. In 1996 the Taliban regime restricted education for females, and the madrasa became the main source of primary and secondary education. About 1.2 million students were enrolled in schools during the Taliban, with fewer than 50,000 of them girls. After the overthrow of the Taliban in late 2001, the Karzai administration received substantial international aid to restore the education system. Around 7,000 schools were operating in 20 of the 32 provinces by the end of 2003, with 27,000 teachers teaching 4.2 million children. Of that number, about 3.9 million were in primary schools. An estimated 57% of men and 86% of women were reported to be illiterate, and the lack of skilled and educated workers was a major economic disadvantage. When Kabul University reopened in 2002, some 24,000 male and female students enrolled for higher education. In the meantime, 5 other universities were being rehabilitated. Public school curricula have included religious subjects, but detailed instruction is left to religious teachers. By 2006, over 4 million male and female students were enrolled in schools throughout Afghanistan. At the same time, school facilities or institutions were also being refurbished or improved, with more modern-style schools being built each year. The American University of Afghanistan in Kabul was established in 2006. Other universities were renovated or rebuilt, such as Kandahar University in the south, Nangarhar University and Khost University in the east, Herat University in the west and Bork University in the north. Despite these achievements, there were still significant obstacles to education in Afghanistan, many of which stem from a lack of funding. Planning curricula and school programs is difficult for the Ministry of Education because a significant amount of the budget for re-education comes from external donors, making it difficult to predict the annual budget. The obstacles to education were even more numerous for Afghan girls. Afghanistan's then Education Minister, Muhammad Hanif Atmar, said in 2007 that 60% of students were studying in tents or other unprotected structures, and some parents refused to let their daughters attend schools in such conditions. A lack of women teachers was another issue that concerned some parents, especially in more conservative areas. Some parents were not allowing their daughters to be taught by men, but this often meant that girls were not allowed to attend school. As the international aid agency Oxfam reported in 2007 that about 1/4 of Afghan teachers were women. In 2009, another concern was the destruction of schools by the Taliban, especially schools for females. Following the destruction of over 150 schools in a year, many parents had doubts about the government's ability to protect them. The following achievements were made in the first decade of the 2000s. Between 2001 and 2010, primary school enrollment rose from around 1 million to nearly 7 million, and the proportion of girls from virtually 0 to 37%. The number of teachers in general education has risen sevenfold, but their qualifications are low. About 31% are women. Since 2003 until 2010, over 5,000 school buildings have been rehabilitated or newly constructed. Just over 50% of schools have usable buildings. Enrollment is low. The average is 1,983 students per institution. 3 institutions have fewer than 200 students. Furthermore, there is a deficiency of qualified faculty members. Only 4.7% of the teaching staff held a PhD. In addition to problems of inadequate resources and lack of qualified teaching staff are issues of corruption. In 2010, the United States began establishing Lincoln Learning Centers in Afghanistan. They serve as programming platforms offering English language classes, library facilities, programming venues, internet connectivity, educational and other counseling services. A goal of the program is to reach at least 4,000 Afghan citizens per month per location. In 2009 and 2010, a 5,001 laptop per child OLPC deployment took place after a funding by an anonymous donor. The team is looking for support to expand the project, fill out grant forms, and convince the Minister of Education, etc., to dedicate part of the funding the country gets for a nationwide deployment, as in Uruguay, Peru, Rwanda, several island states and more coming. According to the Human Development Index, in 2011, Afghanistan was the 15th least developed country in the world. In June 2011, officials from the United States signed a joint statement with Education Minister Ghulam Farooq Wardak to expand opportunities for direct financial support from USAID to the Afghan Ministry of Education. In December 2011, the Bachi Sim Sim children's television series was launched in Afghanistan. It is funded by the U.S. Department of State and is produced in consultation with Afghanistan's Ministry of Education. The project is designed to help educate Afghans from preschool stage and onward. It was reported in May 2013 that there were 16,000 schools across Afghanistan, with 10.5 million students. Education Minister Wardak stated that 3 million children remained deprived of education and requested $3 billion to construct 8,000 additional schools over next 2 years. In 2015 at Kabul University, the first master's degree course in gender and women's studies in Afghanistan began. Challenges to education development. Violence. Afghanistan is one of the worst affected countries by violence against schools, with 670 incidents of attacks on education in 2008. Violence on students prevented nearly 5 million Afghan children from attending school in 2010. In death rates, Afghanistan had 439 teachers, education employees and students killed in 2006 to 9, one of the highest in the world. teacher credentials. Since the Taliban regime was toppled in 2001, up to 6 million girls and boys started attending school. In 2012, the supply of students far exceeded the pool of qualified teachers. According to statistics provided by the Ministry of Education, 80% of the country's 165,000 teachers had achieved the equivalent of a high school education or did not complete their post-secondary studies. Extremist curriculum. Since the toppling of the Taliban regime, under the combined efforts of Afghan and international experts, the curriculum has been changed from extremist Islamic teachings to one relatively better with new books and better training infrastructure. In 2012, there were insufficient schools. Around 4,500 schools are being built according to a recent government report. 40% of schools were conducted in permanent buildings. The rest held classes in UNICEF shelters or were desert schools, with students and teachers gathering in the desert near a village. Child labor. In 2007, more than half of the population of Afghanistan was under the age of 18. UNICEF estimates that close to a quarter of Afghan children between the ages of 7 and 14 were working. In rural areas, the problem is worse, and there are more girls working than boys. This disrupts children's education and possibly prevents them from schooling completely.